was just curious if we're potentially stuck in a vicious cycle here, in that, high housing prices and mortgage lock are keeping people, in their homes and keeping housing prices high. If housing prices are high, then the inflation isn't falling, the PCE isn't falling, which means the Federal Reserve isn't cutting rates, which means mortgage rates aren't dropping, which feeds back into this whole, housing shortage crisis all over again. Are we sort of stuck in a vicious cycle, or is there sort of a place to eddy out here?
Yeah, mortgage rates have come down. The Fed sets the federal funds target rate, which is just for short-term, very specific short-term borrowing, and mortgage rates have started coming down. But nevertheless, it is the case that, as we mentioned, inventories are low because of the mortgage lock or housing lock, and that is kind of, in a sense, supporting higher housing prices, because you have you know but I think over time mortgage rates will come down. They'll probably never come down, not for a long time will they come down to the levels we saw beforehand, and this will slowly unwind. It will take some time. I think what the Fed will be looking at as it sets the federal funds target rate is trying to balance the dual goals of price stability and full employment, trying to manage and navigate the economy to its the magical soft landing, by now a very overused term, but that is what they're trying to do. They do seem to have inflation gradually falling. They've hit a level of interest rates with respect to the federal funds target rate that is impactful. It is seemingly slowing down the economy somewhat. And that's probably something to talk about. How much is it really slowing down the economy? And there is some loosening in the labor markets, but even the labor markets continue to be very, very tight. The unemployment rate fell in November from 3.9 to 3.7. A lot of that had to do with labor force participation rising a tad. Importantly, wages are now the rise in average hourly earnings are going up about 4%. That's how much they went up in November. That's consistent with the core PCE and the core CPI numbers. So one of the concerns I think some economists have had, including the Fed, is that if you have wages rising too fast, that will drive inflation. Now that wages are not really exceeding the rise in the price level, that's a much the wage price spiral is much less of a worry. So that's comforting. And we'll have to see. A lot of forecasts have the unemployment rate rising to around 4.5, 4.7 over the next year, sometime towards the end of 2024. And suggesting that we'll have a lot more loosening. A lot of the forecasts expect economic growth to slow to the 0.5 to 1%, soft landing, no contraction, but slower growth in 2024, consistent with rising unemployment, the unemployment rate. Now, once I've said all that, I would just point out that a year ago, year and a half ago, 2 years ago, a lot of economists thought the recession would have started in early 2023. Then that moved to the latter 2023. Just a month or two ago, a lot of forecasts had the fourth quarter GDP growth at around let's say 1%, slowing economy in the fourth quarter. The Federal Reserve Board of Atlanta puts out a forecast of a GDP called the Nowcast, and they now have their estimate of fourth quarter GDP growth is now 2.6%. That's their December 14th forecast. It gets updated every few days as new data comes out. So that forecast, the GDP Now forecast, has been actually pretty reasonably accurate. It's not precise, but it's reasonably accurate. It suggests the fourth quarter is going to be much better than a lot of the forecasts had suggested, and so that's a factor to consider.